When Muhammad Adib, a young Arab boy in search of a lost goat, stumbles across a dusty cache of pottery jars in a cave near Qumran in 1947, he stuns the world. This is the oldest and most fabulous biblical treasure ever found, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
The discovery of the library on the Dead Sea, of all of this material, which we call Dead Sea Scrolls, has been crucial to our understanding of the Bible and the nature of it and who wrote it and when and how and why and what. Because this library revealed a piece, at least, of every book in the Bible, except Esther, in a manuscript which was 1,000 years older than the oldest Hebrew manuscript we ever had.
Now housed in Jerusalem's Shrine of the Book, the scrolls were written during an era that spanned the last 300 years of Judaism before the destruction of its holiest place, the Great Temple. They speak of a coming schism that would splinter the faith into opposing factions. Compelling and evocative, the scrolls were written at the time that a new religion, Christianity, was being born. Much of the literature contained within the scrolls may well have been known to Jesus himself.
Do not take riches from a man you do not know, lest it only add to your poverty. If God has ordained that you should die in your poverty, so he has appointed it. But do not corrupt your spirit because of it. Dead Sea Scroll, number 4Q416.
Between 1947 and 1960, 11 caves yielded a total of 800 scrolls and an abundance of manuscript fragments from where they had lain undisturbed for 2,000 years. Written on parchment and papyrus, a diverse range of text appears among the scrolls. Most are written in Hebrew, but there is a smattering of Greek and Aramaic. 127 of the documents represent canonized texts, the same as those appearing in modern Bibles. But many of the scrolls contain passages that are new and unfamiliar to scholars. A few of the documents appear as many as 19 times, written by different scribes, indicating that the collection may have been assembled from a variety of sources.
We have discovered that there were in circulation different manuscripts of the same book. The book of Samuel is better than the book which we have, longer, more detailed. The book of Jeremiah is worse, shorter and more confused. So the general rule is that the Dead Sea Scrolls have encouraged us to accept the validity of the text, the Hebrew text which we have, but to acknowledge the fact that there were other texts in circulation.
Were the scrolls based on even earlier, more ancient writings? And who collected them in this remote and barren wilderness? And why? The answer may lie here, in the nearby settlement of Qumran. It was once occupied by a reclusive Jewish sect known as the Essenes. The word Essene comes from Aramaic, meaning pious or healer. The sect had broken away from the mainstream of Judaism about a century and a half before the Jews' fateful war with the Romans. Choosing to live an isolated life in the desert, they dedicated themselves to religious worship in anticipation of a long-awaited Messiah, even as Jesus was about to make his entrance into history. Deeply pacifistic, the Essenes were most likely responsible for hiding the scrolls. But why? Scholars have searched the ruins in vain for answers. Did the sect believe that the Romans would destroy the temple in Jerusalem and had therefore brought its holy documents to Qumran for safekeeping? Perhaps not. For as the texts were translated, it became clear that the Essenes and the Jerusalem priests were not in agreement with one another on fundamental religious issues.
Mixing is forbidden, because the people are holy, and the sons of Aaron are the holy of holies. Nevertheless, as you know, some of the priests and the people are mixing. They are intermarrying and thereby polluting the holy seed. Dead Sea Scroll, number 4Q398.
The most unusual manuscript in the collection is a copper scroll found in cave number 3. It lists 64 locations of buried treasure in the area, but nothing has ever been found.
It appears that the copper scroll was written on copper rather than on leather like all the other scrolls or papyrus, for the reason that it was a treasure list, a document from the temple. And documents from the temple, that is, official documents, often were written on copper, to judge from parallels in other temples.
Since the scrolls were buried at the time the Romans finally destroyed the temple, some scholars have speculated that the people who hid them may also have been responsible for hiding the temple treasures and religious artifacts. But this too is unlikely, due to the deep division between the Essenes and the Jerusalem priests. While providing tantalizing insight into the politics of the time, the scrolls say surprisingly little about who wrote them or who hid them in these soaring cliffs.
I think the scrolls were probably put in the caves by a group of people who expected to return and get them. At the time of the Great War with Rome, which went from 66 to 70, it's probably the case that only a few people knew where they were. There are hundreds and hundreds of caves to be seen in the area where the scrolls were found, and it cannot have been a common knowledge which ones contained these great treasures. So the ones who had the keys perished, probably at the hands of the Romans.
Buried when Jesus walked the Holy Land, preaching a new view of the world, just before a war in which Rome almost annihilated the people of Israel, the scrolls preserved in the caves of Qumran offer a few clues about their authors. But they have provided dramatic insight into the diverse range of texts that existed long before the Holy Scriptures were compiled into the single work we now know as the Bible.